So I want to talk this morning about ethical behavior and how a Buddhist perspective on ethical behavior differs from many, if not most, other faith traditions. And the Buddhist perspective really lines up more with a secular morality than with the other faith traditions, and I'll hope to describe that. And particularly where that happens is with the emphasis on personal responsibility, where there's an intrinsic internal motivation for ethical behavior and for seeing the immediate benefits of living virtuously. You know, Buddhism, like secular moral frameworks, doesn't rely on divine rewards or punishments to encourage ethical conduct. In other words, the consequences they're out there, but they're not being visited upon us, be they rewards or punishment from some other force or external entity. Instead, it has us focus on the natural consequences of our own choices and actions, which comes out of the cultivation of wisdom and compassion as part of our practice. And also from understanding the interconnectedness that we talk about here often as the foundation for moral behavior. Buddhism places significant emphasis on personal responsibility, particularly through the concept of karma. Karma, in its simplest form, refers to the law of cause and effect, where intentional actions lead to corresponding outcomes. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. This principle underscores the idea that we are architects of our own experience. We shape our present and future through our choices and actions. And in this way, personal responsibility is not just a moral obligation. It's a practical necessity as part of our path for creating a life of harmony and well-being, a life where our actions are consistent with our values. And in a secular morality, personal responsibility is similarly central. It's often said, well, if you're not a true believer in some faith tradition, theistic tradition, how can you have morality? Well, the answer is the way we're talking about it this morning. Because ethical decisions are made based on reason, empathy, and the recognition of shared human values. That's critical piece. Not on a fear of divine punishment, not on a fear or hope for heavenly rewards, but for this life right here, right now. And this approach really, it's consistent with both Buddhist teachings and secular approaches to morality. And in Buddhism, we're encouraged to act mindfully and with intention and have our morality and our ethics as a foundation guide our actions that we engage in with mindfulness and intention. Understanding that our actions have direct consequences for ourselves and others. We do not live in vacuums. And both Buddhism and secular morality advocate for intrinsic internal motivation as the basis for our ethical behavior. As I said, in Buddhism, ethical conduct arises naturally as part of our path as we cultivate positive mental states such as compassion, loving kindness, and wisdom. It's hard to embrace and practice those without a firm ethical foundation. And these qualities, again, are pursued not for external validation, but because they lead to the reduction of suffering and the promotion of well-being for ourselves and others. In Pali, it's called Sila, S-I-L-A. The practice of Sila, or moral discipline, is seen as a voluntary commitment to live in alignment with these values, which foster a sense of inner peace and harmony. And that's likewise true in secular morality, where the intrinsic value of ethical behavior is what is emphasized. Actions are considered moral and ethical when they contribute to human flourishing and the well-being of the greater society, which asks us to act out of genuine concern for others. It's I think, a much taller order than when we think our, ethics are going to result in some, damnation or heavenly reward. because it comes from a place, a desire to create a just and compassionate world rather than out of fear or obligation. That breaks down too easily, in my view and in my experience, when it's based upon fear or obligation. But by focusing on the immediate and tangible benefits of ethical conduct, both Buddhism and secular morality provide a framework for living virtuously. One of the key parallels between a Buddhist path and a secular morality is the shared focus on the immediate benefits of ethical behavior. If you think about in Buddhism, following, just as a starting point, following the five lay precepts, abstaining from killing, abstaining from stealing, abstaining from sexual misconduct, abstaining from untruthful speech, and avoiding intoxication, those lead to a life of happiness, trust, and reduced suffering right out of the gate. These precepts are not commandments, however. They are guidelines that help give us some direction in how we cultivate positive relationships. But we have to use discernment. We have to decide. We have to make these difficult ethical choices using those guidelines. They're not commandments and laws that are black and white. They're more nuanced. They're more subtle. Secular morality also highlights the practical advantages of ethical living. By acting with integrity, honesty, and compassion, we build trust, foster cooperation, and create a sense of community. Because, as I said, these outcomes are not only beneficial for society, but contribute to our personal well-being and our sense of purpose. This alignment reinforces the idea that morality is inherently valuable, independent of religious or metaphysical beliefs. A central tenet of this path, of the Buddhist path, is the understanding of interconnectedness, which we talk about often, which teaches that all beings are interdependent and that our actions and choices inevitably affect others, which encourages us to act with mindfulness and compassion, recognizing that ethical behavior contributes not to only to our personal well-being, but to the collective well-being of our society. Secular morality likewise acknowledges the interconnected nature of relationships and the importance of empathy and cooperation in creating a harmonious world. By keeping on the forefront this awareness of interconnection, it inspires us to take responsibility for our actions, to consider the impact of our choices on others. Again, we do not live in a vacuum. We emphasize collective well-being. We highlight the practical relevance of ethical behavior in addressing contemporary challenges such as social justice, environmental sustainability, global cooperation, all the things that are crying out for a response in our modern times. So the Buddhist perspective on morality aligns closely with the principle of secular ethics, particularly the shared emphasis on personal responsibility. It really puts the onus on us, intrinsic motivation, and the immediate benefits of ethical behavior. We can see it. Both frameworks reject the notion of divine rewards or punishments, instead focus on the natural consequences of actions, the cultivation of positive qualities such as compassion, wisdom, and integrity, and by encouraging us to take responsibility for our ethical decisions, to act with mindfulness and intention. The path offers practical and accessible paths to creating a more just, compassionate, and harmonious world. So that's some thoughts this morning on personal responsibility and ethics.